Sometimes a man reaches a point where he's not trying to get ahead anymore. He's just trying to prove he still matters. The day Duncan Merrill reached that point, the sky over Millisport was a dull gray, the kind of color that makes even living things look tired. He stood before the skeletal remains of Thornhill Keep, a forgotten Gothic castle swallowed by ivy, sitting alone on 12 acres of wild, wind-torn land. The stone walls were scarred and split. Moss crept between the blocks like veins. Crows nested in the tower's broken teeth of slate. To most people, it was a monument to decay, a place that had been dying quietly for decades. But Duncan didn't see the rot. He saw bones, strong bones, bones that remembered what they once were. He ran his rough hand across the cold wall, feeling the firmness of the stone beneath centuries of neglect. "You're not dead," he whispered, "and neither am I." The wind swirled as if answering back. It was madness, of course it was. 53 years old, broke, divorced, with nothing left but $47,000 in savings and a heart full of unfinished dreams. And he was about to spend every last dollar on a ruin. His sister said he'd lost his mind. His ex-wife said it was a cry for help. The townspeople laughed. But Duncan didn't care. When he looked at the castle, he didn't see ruin. He saw a reflection of himself. Something broken that might still have worth. And in that moment, beneath the gray sky and the smell of wet earth, he made the decision that would change everything. He bought it. The road to Thornhill Keep had started long before that day. 6 months earlier, Duncan had been sitting in a one-room apartment so small he could touch every wall without moving his chair. The place smelled of dust, plaster, and cheap coffee. His construction business had gone under years ago, swallowed by the recession. His wife, Petta, had left soon after, remarrying a man who wore watches that cost more than Duncan's truck. His son, Garrett, texted occasionally, polite, short messages that said, "Hope you're okay, but never, I'll visit." The nights were long and sleepless. He'd lie awake listening to the hum of a dying fridge and the faint traffic outside, thinking about how easily a man could disappear without anyone noticing. One night, unable to stand it, he opened his laptop. Real estate listings, cheap houses, old barns, forgotten places. He wasn't looking to buy anything. He was looking to feel something. And then he saw it. Historic castle for sale, Thornhill Keep, built 1887, $47,000. The photos were like something from a Gothic dream. Turrets devoured by vines, archways dark and skeletal, windows shattered like eyes that had seen too much. Yet beneath it all, Duncan saw symmetry, care, craftsmanship. Whoever built it had known beauty. That night the decision haunted him. At 2:47 a.m. he stopped thinking. He clicked contact agent. 3 days later, he was standing in the shadow of the castle, mud clinging to his boots, heart pounding with something dangerously close to hope. When Garrett arrived the next weekend, his reaction was a mix of disbelief and concern. "You did what?" he asked, staring up at the castle's crumbling tower. Duncan just handed him the iron keys. "Come inside before you judge." Inside, the air was thick with dust and time. Light streamed through the holes in the roof, catching on swirling particles like smoke. The wooden floors groaned under their steps. Every corner told a story of neglect. Wallpaper peeling like old skin, furniture collapsed under its own weight, bird nests in chandeliers that once shone. "Dad," Garrett whispered, "this place is done." Duncan smiled faintly. "So was I," he said. They explored anyway. In the library, half the shelves had caved in, but the wood was solid. In the chapel, boards covered stained glass that still shimmered beneath the grime. And in the study, a loose floorboard revealed a leather-bound book wrapped in oilcloth. They pried it open. Thornhill Keep Construction Ledger, 1887. Inside, perfect penmanship cataloged every detail. Oak beams imported from Germany. Tiffany windows from New York. A mural commissioned from an artist named Maximilian Cross. Garrett looked up. "Dad, this could be worth something." Duncan didn't answer. He was staring at the handwriting, at the careful precision of a man who built something meant to last. For the first time in years, Duncan felt the spark of creation. the same fire his father once carried when he built homes by hand. "Maybe it's worth saving," he murmured. Garrett just sighed. "You're crazy." "Maybe," Duncan said, "but maybe crazy's exactly what I need to be." The weeks that followed were brutal. Duncan's hands blistered and bled. The air inside the castle reeked of mildew and dead things. Rain leaked through the roof in 5 places. But with every hour of scraping, sanding, and hauling, something inside him came back to life. Garrett returned each weekend, helping without admitting he wanted to. They filled dumpsters with trash and rot, swept out decades of decay, and began to see beauty underneath. Then came Dr. Imogen Fairchild, a historian from the State Historical Society, small, sharp-eyed, and skeptical. She arrived in a gray sedan, inspected the castle, and at first said little. But when she reached the chapel and pulled down the boards covering the stained glass, she gasped. "These," she whispered, tracing the glass with trembling fingers. "These are authentic Tiffany windows, late 1880s. She turned to Duncan. "Do you realize what you've bought?" Duncan didn't, not yet, but he knew he'd been right to trust his instincts. That night he and Garrett sat in the main hall, surrounded by dust and light that shimmered in faint blues and reds through the glass. Garrett finally spoke. "You really think this place can be saved?" Duncan smiled softly. "I don't just think it. I know it." For the first time in years, his voice didn't sound tired. It sounded like faith. A month later, they found the secret that changed everything. While clearing debris from the ballroom, Garrett's crowbar hit something hollow beneath the wall. Dr. Fairchild examined the plaster and began scraping carefully. Inch by inch, color appeared. First a shimmer of gold, then the curve of a face, then a sky painted in hues of lapis and amber. Beneath the crumbling walls was a hidden mural, enormous, breathtaking. Fairchild froze, whispering, This is Maximilian Cross." The name sent a ripple through history. Cross was one of the great lost muralists of the Gilded Age. His works had vanished, destroyed, sold, forgotten. Until now, when experts confirmed its authenticity, the valuation reached millions. Overnight, the castle became news. Reporters called. Collectors offered absurd sums. The same townspeople who once called him insane now called him lucky. But Duncan didn't feel lucky. Standing before that mural, its painted figures of love, time, and loss gazing back at him, he felt humbled. This wasn't about wealth. It was about legacy, about the men who built with their hearts and hands, who poured grief into beauty. "He built this place for love," Duncan said one night, staring at the mural centerpiece. A man holding his wife's hand beneath a painted sky. "And maybe that's what I've been trying to do too." Garrett nodded slowly. "Guess you finally built something that'll last." Duncan smiled. "Not yet, but I will." Then came the storm. A letter from the attorney revealed that Thornhill Keep's ownership might still belong to descendants of Ambrose Wickham, the man who built it. Duncan could have ignored it. He could have sold the property before anyone knew. He could have walked away rich. But one night, sitting in the library with the ledger and Wickham's letters spread before him, he read a line that stopped him cold. "A craftsman builds with honesty, or his work will not stand." Duncan picked up the phone and said, "Find them. Tell them everything." A week later, Irene Lockwood, Wickham's great-granddaughter, arrived from Oregon. Small, gray-haired, her eyes kind but cautious, she walked through the halls, running her hand along the walls like someone visiting a relative's grave. "He built this for his wife," she said softly. "We spent generations fighting over it. You're the first person who ever tried to save it." When she learned Duncan could have hidden it, she smiled through tears. "Then you deserve it." She signed away her family's claim, leaving him everything on one condition. "Promise you'll keep it alive." Duncan promised. For the first time in decades, he didn't feel like a man fixing something broken. He felt like a man carrying something sacred. Months later, Thornhill Keep was alive again. Not as a mansion for the rich, but as a restoration school for the future. Students came from across the country to learn how to preserve the past, how to build things meant to endure. Dr. Fairchild ran the programs. Irene taught history. Garrett, now his father's partner, handled the operations. And Duncan, the man everyone had once written off, taught craftsmanship, patience, and pride. The castle buzzed with laughter, tools, and purpose. The ballroom mural glowed under soft lights. The Tiffany glass sang with morning sun. At the open house, the great hall filled with hundreds of people. Locals, students, even the mayor. Duncan stepped forward, his voice steady but full of emotion. When I bought this place, everyone thought I was crazy. Maybe I was, but sometimes you've got to lose your mind to find your purpose. He paused, looking around. This castle was built from love. I just had to remember what love could build. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous. Garrett placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "You did it, Dad," he whispered. Duncan smiled. "No," he said. "We did." Years later, the castle stood proud again, alive with echoes of hammers, laughter, and stories. Students came from everywhere to study its history, to restore, to learn, to build. The town that once laughed now bragged about the miracle in their midst. Duncan and Garrett lived in the tower rooms, their days filled with purpose, their nights with quiet gratitude. On the wall near the entrance, a bronze plaque gleamed with words taken from Ambrose Wickham's final journal. A building is just stone and wood until someone gives it purpose. Sometimes Duncan would read it aloud to the students before class. "Remember that," he'd say. "That's what you're doing here." He'd run his hand along the stone, feeling the cool strength beneath his palm, the strength that had outlasted wars, storms, and time itself. He'd think of the day he first stood in that overgrown yard, broke, tired, and desperate, and how that ruin had given him back everything he'd lost: faith, family, purpose, himself. As the sun set through the stained glass, spilling color across the floor like melted jewels, Duncan smiled. He'd done it. He'd built something that would last. If this story touched you, if you felt the echo of something inside you still worth saving, take a second. Tap that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more like it. And tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it right now as this story finds you?